Thank you. Thank you for sharing your talents with us tonight. A second grade class at Franklin Elementary School. With that, I would like to welcome all our visitors and media representatives on behalf of our school board. Moving forward, we have the student school board.
They're over 500, so that's good. The golf season's over. Younger students year, so we weren't really an experienced team, but we're looking forward to getting better next year. And so now I'm going to go into the FFA. So FFA has nationals coming up. They're going to be going to Indianapolis at the end of October. There's around 20 students going. They're going for a wide range of committees. I know about egg sales and floral is the two that I know are going. We wish them good luck and hope they bring back some gold medals. And then Model UN, which me and Kira are both a part of, we have our first conference in Des Moines, also at the end of October. So we hope we do good in that situation, and then won't have another one till February in Chicago. Now I'll pass it over to Kira with some more information.
The dance was pretty amazing. It was face themed and it had starlights and plants hanging. And it was the first year since COVID that the dance is actually allowed to have food in the area, so that was nice. The council also decorated downtown businesses and all of the Muscatine doors on the high school, so to get more homecoming spirit. I'd like to thank all the businesses that allowed us to do that. The homecoming king and queen were crowned for the year of 2023. They were Anthony Ash and Fiona Glenn. Finally, the senior hand wall, which is the wall where the seniors dip their hand in paint and put their hand on the wall, was very successful, and it's been. And finally, the girls cross country got second in their home meet, which is very exciting, and there is a possibility that we will go to state this year.
Thank you to both of you for this comprehensive report. Keep up the good work, and I don't know if any board members would like to ask any question or say any words to both of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Keep up the good job. With that, we move into our next item on our agenda, which is Citizen Speaks. If anyone in the audience wants to address the board, please step to the podium, state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes only to speak. Per Iowa code, we cannot respond or engage in any discussion during the board meeting. Saying that, it doesn't mean you cannot reach out to each one of us individually after the meeting via email, or you can call us and so on, but during the meeting we cannot respond. My understanding that we do have 3 people signed up to talk or to speak tonight, so I will turn that to Daphne, our secretary, and she will start calling on each one of you. Thank you.
Suzanne, are you ready? Whatever, okay.
My name is Megan Keeler, and I live at 1512 Bidwell here in Muscatine. I'm here because last Monday a substitute grew so frustrated with the German 1 class, not being able to count in German, that she resorted to calling them idiots and morons and telling them they don't know crap. I am here because after that, 2 more MHS staff members validated her behavior without asking a single question about what had transpired in that room. Then, during a backhanded apology a few days later, these same kids were told that essentially bad behavior begets bad behavior. Some apology. I'm here because after sharing my son's experience, other parents shared with me their kids' experience. A drama teacher who 2 years in a row has exhibited racially discriminatory behavior. This year, she told a young black thespian that she would have to tame her hair if she wants a particular part. Whereas last year's theatrical production included an entire scene with offensive rhetoric about Asian people. A pre-AP math teacher melted down last week, dropping F-bombs at his students because he was quote-unquote tired of their shit. I know this job is not easy. I am sure these kids press every dang button some days. I get it that parental support is at an all-time low. But here's the deal. Bad behavior deserves consequences, not demeaning and name-calling. It deserves intervention, not school-sanctioned bullying. We appear to have a problem in our high school, and I am here to ask what you are going to do about it. I would never ask for you to go after our teachers, 99% of who are absolutely wonderful. I am asking you to publicly address the few bad actors. Our district needs to send a clear and unwavering message that this sort of damaging, abusive behavior will not be tolerated any longer. I have always been involved in my kids' education, volunteered in their classrooms, donated money and supplies at every ask. So to have this chalked up as a mom who got mad that her kid got yelled at is insulting at the very best. It is, however, at its very worst, reckless negligence of our board and our district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Suzanne Bissell. I live at 2688 Becky Thatcher Road in Muscatine. I'm a parent of a freshman at the high school who's not in the German class. He's taking Spanish. And I am also the parent of a former Muscatine student. She did not graduate from Muscatine because of the sort of thing that Megan so bravely addressed. She was so afraid of the high school and some of the mean teachers there that did exactly opposite of what Mr. DeBeat said in the newspaper the other day in reference to the whole substitute thing about the district being a loving and kind, that you work to be a loving and kind or supportive place. And I think for students that fit the box, that do all the things that they're supposed to, that's true. It does work. But for students, for whatever reasons that don't, be it academic, or in my daughter's case, she's autistic. She is a brilliant person. When I took her out of the high school in January of 2019, she had a GPA of 4.14. She's also a very talented musician. But Megan made me, I was impressed with her bravery to go forward and to speak publicly about the thing that happened to her child. Because I wasn't brave like that when my daughter was there. Yes, the incident that led to me removing her from school and homeschooling her for the rest of her time, she graduated from our homeschool, I should have talked about it. I should have come here. I should have told you guys what happened because, unless people know, they don't know. And bad behavior continues to happen. And I do think we have some adult bullies in big positions at the high school. And the situation that happened to my daughter, there were many situations. And again, like Megan, 99% of the people at the high school are fantastic. Teachers helped, assistant principals helped. I was there all the time. I also was a parent that was always involved because I used to be a teacher too. And I was a substitute in this district. I still hold a license to be a substitute, but I don't want to be a substitute. And it's hard. I know. I've seen it from all the different sides. But it is not okay for people who have been in power. I don't know another word to say it. But the drama teacher, interestingly, that Megan mentioned, she pretty much ruined my daughter's self-confidence in her ability to be in musical theater. And the drama teacher was well aware of my daughter's autism. She was well aware of the supportive nature of me and our family and how we would do anything to help. And the straw that broke the camel's back that we walked out of that drama teacher's office and never came back. And I said, you know what, you've wanted to be homeschooled, there's my time. For a long time, if I could just finish, I'll be quick. Let's do it, because obviously this isn't getting you anywhere here. The drama teacher thought that my daughter was good enough to be in the fall play that year, 2018, because Bridget could play the accordion. And not many people can, and she wanted an accordion in the show. So Bridget was in the very small fall play. When it came time for the spring musical, which is a large group of people, probably 30 or more, everybody that had been in the fall play but Bridget was on the cast list. And one of the reasons I didn't speak up is because then I am the disgruntled mom whose kid didn't get into the play. But I also know Bridget has a lot of talent, and Bridget's a hard worker, and we would have supported her. And when I sat in that drama teacher's office that day with Bridget to find out what happened, like what could she have done differently? Was there something in the fall play that wasn't right? And she said, well, she can't dance. And we know dancing is hard for her. If you're familiar with autism, it's, yeah, your body's placed in space is rough. But we would work with it. We could make it work. And she said because Bridget didn't have any dance background, she could not be in the fall play because it was dance heavy, and they were bringing back a choreographer who is a former Muscatine student from New York, and he would not have the patience to slow down. And I said, interesting. So if Bridget was in a wheelchair, she also would not be in the fall play. She didn't have a lot to say to that. It was apparent that this was not going to work. There's a lot of favoritism that goes on in that program, and there's a lot of kids I've talked to since that have had similar experiences. And so maybe the district doesn't know about that. Ryan Castle's a wonderful man. Maybe he doesn't know about this either, but I think it needs to be out there about that, and the band director of the marching band. Again, people are afraid to speak out because their kids will be targeted by those teachers, and they won't be in band, they won't get to be in plays. But now that my kid is gone and not there, I can't speak out. So that is what I have to say. I just wanted you guys to know.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Good evening. My name is Casey Keeler. I live at 1512 Bidwell Road. So I have a unique perspective. I am a U.S. Navy recruiter. Actually, Muscatine is one of my schools, which means I've talked to hundreds of kids at a time, as far as down to 5 kids in a classroom at one time. One thing that I've noticed in my 12 years of being a Navy recruiter, going in to talk to schools, which is kind of like being a substitute, respect is earned, and if you give it, you get it back. There are certain ways to handle yourself. There are certain ways to conduct yourself professionally in front of people, in front of students, whether it be freshmen or elementary school kids or high school seniors that are 3 days away from graduating that know everything. It's really not as difficult as people make it out to be, in my opinion, just because being able to stand there and be an authoritative figure as you speak, whether you be a teacher, a substitute teacher, or a Navy recruiter, it is really not that difficult if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, it makes that task extremely difficult, which leads me to wonder, in the Navy, we do training. Oh my God, we train about everything all the time, all day, every day, training that we don't need, training that we don't need, training that we don't need, but it winds up being, we don't need it because we've learned it over and over and over again. So what do substitute teachers wind up having as far as training goes? An associate's degree and that's it? Like, what is the required, the path that is taken? Just somebody off the street with an associate's degree from enter random school, and they can come in and talk to kids and do whatever they want to do and whatever. That's not exactly the most productive way of going about it. I don't know if there's some sort of list of who's had issues, or if there's some sort of Excel spreadsheet of this person's got this complaint against them, or this person's got this issue, or whatever the case may be. But at some point in time, the same names keep getting brought up over and over and over again, and it's probably for a reason. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you got to do, but I know in the Navy, you're going to be trained over and over and over again. If it becomes a problem to the point where you're not getting the training, you're not doing that job anymore. Huya.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to approach the board and speak? I mean, that's Daphne. Do we have any other name? Or that's all. Anybody else? Okay, thank you everybody. And as I mentioned before, and I would like to remind everybody again, that you can reach out to any of us as board members anytime after the meeting via calls, emails, and so on. So with that, we move into our next item on our agenda, which is Board Targets Goals Report. Item A, students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Item B, Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably. And item C, students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. And under that, we do have one item, MTSS presentation by Becky Witcher and Paige Williams. Please.
All right, thank you, everyone. So, Paige and myself would like to take a few minutes to talk to the board about MTSS. So Paige Williams, she is our SCBH specialist, which is a position that we have under TLC. So this evening, we are going to give you an overview of what MTSS is. We're going to share our current reality, and then we're going to talk about next steps. So this is the definition of what is MTSS, and this is from our U.S. Department of Education. So it is a multi-tiered system of support. We call it MTSS, and it is a framework designed to respond to the needs of all students within a system which integrates but is not limited to tier behavior supports and academic supports. MTSS is a whole school, data-driven, prevention-based framework for improving student learning outcomes for all of our students through a layered continuum of evidence-based practices and systems. So what is MTSS? If you unwrap that, it is whole school, it is data-driven, and it is prevention-based. And it also meets our state requirement. All schools in Iowa are required to use this model in how they respond to all student needs. So tonight, we are going to give you some information that's going to lead to future topics. Hopefully you will let Paige and I come back because we'd like to share with the board some more information, such as what are universal practices at the building level, implementation, data, what happens when there's gaps, what does troubleshooting that look like? And we'd also like to come back and go a little bit deeper into a support system that we have, that we've created our own, our behavior support team. But for tonight, we need to build a foundation. So tonight's details is about MTSS. So Paige is going to talk about these tiers, which you hear teachers talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So that's the next part of our presentation.
So the multi-tiered system of supports framework is typically depicted as either a pyramid or a triangle. There are 3 separate tiers. The first tier is universal practices. So it is important that all students have access to universal practices. When time, energy, and resources are devoted to creating and maintaining a robust foundation, 80 to 90% of students are successful without additional supports or interventions. Universal practices include the explicit teaching and reteaching of expectations. So students are taught how to behave across all different school settings. This can look like how we walk in the hallways, how to line up for recess, what the voice level should look like in the lunchroom, and how we treat others with success. And this is not just expectations, routines, and procedures that are taught in the first couple of weeks of school. This should be built in to our school day throughout the school year. Just like all students have access to core curriculum and instructional practices for academics, universal practices for behavior are used to teach and reinforce what behavior should look like for students throughout the school day. A robust universal tier is the foundation for the additional supports and the intensive interventions that 1 to 5% of our students require in order to be successful. So when we're thinking about tiers, it's also important that we think about these in terms of layers of support. All students should continue to receive universal practices despite the need for additional supports or interventions. So Tier 1, as Becky said, the purpose of Tier 1 really is to focus on prevention. We want to prevent behavior from escalating or even from occurring in the first place as much as possible. Another key goal of our universal practices is to help our students have greater access to experiences and supports that will improve their likelihood of success. Another feature of universal practices is that it's an all hands on deck approach. So we expect that all adults, all staff members who interface with students throughout the day should have training on our universal practices. And this has been the focus of our district-wide professional learning. And our goal is to provide learning for all MCSD employees on the power and the importance of these practices. So some of the benefits of having a robust Tier 1 Tier 1 universal practices in place is that we can actually increase the amount of instructional time that our students have in order to increase our student achievement. And that's done because we're focused on providing those proactive supports. So by prioritizing proaction, we're actually decreasing the amount of time that administrators and other staff members are responding to problem behavior. Another benefit of a strong Tier 1 is that it can help foster a calm, safe environment, and it actually improves the climate and culture of our buildings. It can also increase both student and staff attendance. And like we said before, because of its all hands on deck approach, it also empowers our staff members through professional learning so that they can attend to these behaviors and also so that they can help all of our students. So sometimes data will indicate that students are struggling to meet the school or classroom expectations, and those students may need to receive additional supports. So these supports might include checking in or out with a preferred adult, to review behavior throughout the school day and to receive corrective feedback. It could also look like small group social skills instruction or small group counseling. These additional supports are built into the infrastructure of the building. So if we have a strong foundation, a strong universal tier, then these pieces, these supplemental supports are already built in. And we can address student behavior quickly, and as soon as data suggests that we need to, we move in to these supplemental supports without overwhelming our building system. At Tier 3, students, these are our students where, despite our supplemental or targeted supports, they continue to have recurring or chronic behavior problems at school. So the next step is to add that additional layer of more individualized intervention. So these interventions actually require further data collection to ensure that they're effective. And because they're individualized based on student needs, they do take time to develop. So there will always be a population of our students in our schools who require these individualized intensive interventions. However, if the time and energy and resources required have been put in place to build this robust universal tier, then the number of students who require intensive levels of intervention will not overwhelm the building system. So the current supports that we have in our building, in Muscatine we have layers of support in place to support the implementation of a robust Tier 1. Till 360 is an outside consultative firm that we are working with to provide district level support. Last year we had the opportunity to apply for the Stronger Connections grant through the state of Iowa. We were awarded $327,000 over the next 3 years. to improve the social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes for students. So some of this money has been dedicated to our work with TIL 360. They've helped us develop and implement our multi-tiered framework for meeting students' needs. So other things that they've helped provide are consultation and coaching to our district and building leaders. They also help provide that district-wide professional learning that we've offered to our staff. Another level of support is our SEBH lead teachers. So we have SEBH lead teachers in 7 of our 9 buildings. They provide professional learning at the building level. They also collect and analyze building and individual student behavior data. They also help to coordinate additional behavior supports and interventions based on that data. And they support staff in the creation, implementation, and monitoring of behavior support plans. Additionally, we have school counselors who work as support for our students in teaching some of those expectations, as well as social skills and counseling. In Muscatine, we have school counselors in all of our elementary and secondary buildings. School counselors provide teaching to students at Tier 1, 2, and 3, and this can look like whole group lessons in classrooms. It can also look like small groups based on need. So some examples might be making friends. We might have a group of students who that's really hard for them and they need some additional skills instruction, some explicit teaching on how to build friendships. It could also be on self-regulation, managing one's emotions. These are the types of things that our school counselors can help provide.
So challenges and next steps. So our current reality, implementation, foundation, and reactive to proactive. So our current reality is that we are all in the middle. We're in the middle of a district-wide implementation of our universal practices for addressing behavior. The nature of implementation is that we are currently at different starting points, and that's something that we are addressing through continued supports and resources. Some anticipated barriers, resources. We have dedicated staff that focus on these areas, but again, sustaining those resources is something that we need to anticipate and plan for. And of course, there's always the use of time. This year in our school calendar, we have 4 teacher in-service days, and these days have been dedicated for our certified staff and our support staff, and we have really used that time that's been to our benefit. So, as we talked about earlier, across all buildings, we are really focusing on developing that strong foundation so that we can move from a reactive approach to a more proactive approach in responding to behavior. We hope that this information that we shared tonight provides you with just a common knowledge of what is MTSS, because MTSS is the framework and it's the foundation of all of our buildings. And in future sessions, we would like to come back and take a little bit deeper dive into universal practices and then a behavior support team, because we have a process that can work with teachers and students when you see the yellow and the red targeted specifically for that area. We could talk about this for like hours and days, and there are week-long courses on MTSS if you would like to register through the AEA and take classes. It's that deep and it's that wide. So again, tonight is just minutes. That's why we would like to take future times to come back and give a little bit deeper, more information, and then another layer of information. So who might have questions for Paige and myself? Karen.
I'm going to take a little bit from what the gentleman said. I actually also did sub-teaching a little bit myself too. And you need to be a very special person to be able to do substitute teaching. And how it is addressed, as in how much information that you receive before you start, there is some instruction. But it does not get, I believe, to like the level that, you're talking about in here. So I guess my question is paraphrased around that. You're talking about everything with the teachers. And I almost feel like when that's said, I don't hear and substitute teachers. So what is there the possibility in which to maybe help them be able to step up to the plate how they need to too?
Sure. So when we talk about substitute teachers, and back in, I'm not going to say the year, it's been a while, but I too was a substitute teacher, and I gained a lot of knowledge from that, and I enjoyed that experience. What we have for our substitute teachers is some onboarding. When we talk about MTSS, our substitute teachers are alongside our teachers in providing core or universal. So our substitute teachers really probably wouldn't be involved if a student is in an intervention group or a targeted or intensive intervention. So our substitute teachers would be familiar with universal and core. So when I'm subbing and I walk into a room, there would be detailed lesson plans that's covering tier 1, because they're doing tier 1 all day. We have over the summer offered when we onboard our new teachers, also our substitute teachers coming, because we've had a lot of curriculum changes over the years, and so we do work with them. Our building instructional coaches also work with our substitute teachers, especially those subs that are there for more than just a day or two. We have many long-term subs. Teachers that take a leave or a maternity leave. So they're 6, 8, 10 weeks. And so our instructional coach and our TLC team really provides support for those teachers, from anything from Power School to curriculum to just the overall master schedule and what they would need to do for that. But as always, we can always, when we know better, we do better. And so it is hard right now with the shortage of substitute teachers, and so we definitely need to value what they're doing in the classroom, and if they need help or support or have questions, we definitely need to do that.
Thank you.
Is this being implemented now across the buildings?
MTSS?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then I definitely want you to come back for session 2, like next month.
Yeah.
If we can, because a lot of my questions fall into the implementation. We're also reviewing a policy. I guess we don't really need to review it because it's state ordered. We can't change anything on it, but a lot of those accompanying procedures, and I'm really curious how it all fits together, as well as the language that's used. So we kind of seem to have 3 different documents, or I guess languages, if I don't overuse that word. So I'm just not sure how they all go together. How does a major or a minor become a tier 1 or a tier 2 or a level 1 or level 3 in the responses? So I have a lot of questions there, as well as the referral processes to get to tier, and what that looks like as far as documentation and parent engagement. So lots of questions with that, but I'm not asking them.
No,
I'm waiting
and
for
actually,
session 2.
we kind of anticipated maybe there might be a few questions around MTSS or behavior. So we actually kind of talked through what might they ask us. So as a follow-up to you, we just need to remember that the MTSS framework, it's not free from consequences. So problem behaviors, they will result in a consequence of some kind. The purpose of the MTSS framework is to provide corrective consequences that prevent the behavior from occurring. Okay? For example, I'm a student, I take a math test and I don't do so well. Are we done? Probably not. We come back, we reteach, student has an opportunity to retest, show their learning. Same thing with behavior. We have behavior, we might have a behavior incident, we come back, we reteach, we start all over again. But part of that data collection comes through the MTSS process. All buildings have an SST, which is a student support team, and that is a layer that all buildings have. Some schools have all schools have a SST for academic, behavior, and attendance. And this kind of gets into our universal practices. So I can't steal all of our thunder if we're coming back possibly in November. But some schools, like the high school, they have multiple SST teams because they have 9th grade, 10th grade, and so on. But this is a framework that SST can receive referrals and be preventative instead of, reactive. I don't know if that answers all your questions, but it's good that we know what you're thinking.
Yes. So I feel like I should just make the statement, too, that I feel like for any of this to be successful, right, we spend a lot of time laying foundations. We talk about that a lot. Yep. So that implementation to be successful, clear, universal expectations across the board. We're working on that. We'll come into that. So that statement. And then because I'm a stickler for all the acronyms, what is TLC?
Yes.
You can take this one.
It's teacher learning and compensation.
Okay.
All right. Yep.
Thank you.
That was an easy question.
Yeah, and our TLC positions, they fall under so our instructional coaches, and then Paige's position falls under teacher leadership.
Okay.
So we had a lot of talking in community conversation before the board meeting today about behavioral activities in the schools, and talked about Leader in Me versus Character Counts, PBIS, IEP 504, Boys Town versus 7 Habits, all these activities. So is this something new added onto that? Is it replacing something?
No, I'm actually going to let you
How
take
many
that one with the
folders
positive
do
behavior
people have to fill out if there's an issue, following which ones and which buildings?
Sure. And I think that's why Becky and I really wanted to have this session be about the framework, just because it is really foundational for how all of these pieces fit together. So when we look at multi-tiered system of supports, we have curriculum that might be embedded into certain tiers. Some of it would be universal, some would be supplementary. Some we might use with just a few students and it would be intensive. But it's really our curriculum, it's as well as our practices and how it all fits together so that we can support our students based on their level of need.
So is Leader in Me like universal? Or is that a tier 2?
It depends on what building we're in as of right now.
Well, into PBIS is, common language. So some of our schools might use the Leader in Me framework with the 7 habits to, in teaching and modeling respect and how to be proactive and things like that. Character counts, for those of you that remember character counts, citizenship, respect, responsibility, careness, fairness, things like that. So all of these big ideas, respect, all of that falls under respect, but the common language, they might be using like the Leader in Me as a common language. They might be using character counts. Boys Town has a methodology. The methodologies are all the same. It's around respect, taking care of each other, taking care of yourself. When something happens, what do you do? How do you go back? How do you fix it in a proactive way? How do you teach students how to be proactive and, have those social skills, or like, I said that and I was wrong. Can we talk about it? Let's make this a win-win. So it's just kind of terminology, but it all centers around the same thing.
There's something I notice from when you're talking. For some reason, I keep thinking you're talking about the younger kids. And I think what Matt is also alluring to is this also the same direction in high school, and how do you get this across to the high school students? Because when you say those words, they're nice words. But how do you get that same respect words and things like that across to the high school? That might be in your tier 2, sorry.
No, I'm thinking of, adult modeling. When the adults model behavior, also it's a teaching and learning atmosphere, not just teaching. It goes both ways. I think, again, it comes back to that foundation and what systems are in place and getting ahead of situations instead of after it happens. So I think we are working to tighten those up with whatever supports they need, whatever, common language they use, or whatever poster is up in the room. Just because a poster is up in the room doesn't necessarily mean that. So, it's building relationships with students, rapport in the classroom, teacher interacting with students. Hey, as a class, whether I'm in kindergarten or I'm in a senior class, how are we going to work together? What does working together look like? And when we're not working together, what does that look like? And how are we going to hold each other accountable? So it's this same terminology. It might just be a little less words when they might be shorter than when they're taller, but it's the same universal practice. And that's why Tier 1 is called universal, means all, PK-12.
And that's what I want to say, Becky. So I was planning to ask, and you did answer already. So this is what they learn or practice at the universal level, right? But one of the things during the presentation, one of the things that caught my eyes is in Tier 3, you spoke of something called individual skills lessons. Okay. Now, this is, I mean, if you may explain or expand on that a little bit, are we taking those concepts at the universal level and just embedding this just with one student, practicing that with one student, or do we mean something different with that?
Sure. Yeah, I think we could liken it to how we attend to student needs for academics, right? So maybe we have a student who requires some very intensive academic instruction, right? So we're going to minimize the number of people in their group. We're going to make that intervention happen more frequently so that it's more powerful and we see a bigger impact. So the same thing would occur for behavior, right? So we have a student who data shows is really struggling in maybe one or two specific areas, and we're going to make sure that we have some prevention strategies in place, we have some teaching intervention strategies in place, and we have some response strategies in place. That would all be a part of, if we're looking at intensive intervention, a part of a student's behavior intervention plan or behavior support plan.
Thank you.
And you said this is for academics too, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so just let me throw this out there. If 80% of the students are not experiencing success at the universal level, does a class then elevate to tier 2 or tier 3, or when does the reteaching start at a group level?
Yeah. Immediately at that day. So again,
and who requests that?
And well, ideally, we look at that 80% as being 80% mastery for core. Who identifies it? Teachers are always collecting data. We have, informal assessments. We have formal assessments. They're meeting in their CTTs daily, so they're tracking. We have screeners. We have benchmarks. So we always have our eye on that academic piece and where they're at. We respond to interventions. All buildings have intervention in their master schedule. Reading intervention, literacy intervention, math intervention. Susan Clark has their dedicated leadership time, Muskie time. So those times are embedded into the master schedule to respond and to support students that might need an intervention in whatever academic area that is. But your first question is, okay, if there's more than 80% and I need to move on, well, that's kind of telling me, hey, all my kiddos right here aren't understanding or whatever, so then you reteach, rework, dig a little bit deeper, that kind of thing. Teachers are a master at small grouping, so they might need to do a small group with this group on this concept, reteach, large group. So they're always coming back and forth to small group, large group, whole group, and kind of responding to that. And we would probably tell you, and I don't know if you remember when Joelle was presenting with literacy, you saw a beautiful triangle. It was like perfect. At times our triangle is not perfect. And so we are, when that triangle is flipped or when we have more to, we have to kind of tier our way out of things. So we know that it comes back to universal core, and we try to beef up. So our new literacy, we increase minutes. And we actually went with a different methodology in, the science of reading. So we do respond to that.
And I would also add, and if the purpose, one of the features of multi-tiered system of supports is that we're using effective evidence-based practices. So if we know that that part's true and we're still not meeting 80 to 90% of our students, another piece that we might look at, whether it was for academics or behavior, is the fidelity of the implementation. So are we actually getting that in front of our students as regularly as we think that we are? So that's another maybe way of looking at that upside down or skewed triangle.
I have a question that has more to do with when you're talking about the challenges and next steps, because as a board, one of the things that we're required to do is, in a manner of speaking, figure out where the money is at. And so you mentioned that special grant was only for like 3 years. And then we also have some of the ESSER dollars that are going to be off on us coming up real shortly. And so, in other words, this is going to impact some of these things that you want to continue with. Is that correct?
It may. It depends. I mean, that's something that we'll have to kind of look at. We'll need to look at the effectiveness and the impact that they're making and then make decisions for it because, as you said, we've added some positions. So what does that look like in moving forward? Is the need still there? What does the need look like? And what can we do?
And Karen, to your point, part of the focus of that was to build capacity in the system, right? And this work has been going on, prior to, the last few years. It's just been more intensely focused over the last couple of years. Each building, as they are building their improvement plans for this year, have goals in 2 areas, instruction and environment. So each building has an environment team, right? So they're looking at specifically, what do we need in this building? And those components are, again, there's consistency about what those kind of core components are, like common expectations and how are they doing that. Then we're also leveraging that TIL 360. They're coming in, they're observing in buildings and providing feedback and coaching. Well, here's some things you're doing well. Here's some areas you're not doing well. Sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable, but it's how do we identify the areas that we really need to improve in and make those adjustments. But and we talked a lot about this in our community conversation. And obviously, this is an important topic. But again, if we're building relationships, positive relationships with kids and setting high expectations, good things will happen. Part of the job that we have as a district is providing the support, the training and resources for teachers to do that successfully. For all staff, not just teachers, all staff to do that successfully. And again, knowing tonight, we're not going to get to all of those levels at once. No. It's way too much. So how do we come back and continue this conversation with you and ensure we're bringing the right information to you that you need?
Thank you. Can either one of you give me an idea of when you talk about universal behaviors or when you're talking about universal, what expectations or what behaviors? Give me an idea of what a universal behavior or universal expectation might be.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that this is just as a clarification, when we say like common expectations, that can be based on the building. It's the fact that they're teaching common expectations and that they're explicitly talking about like what those expectations are at the building is really what's important. So at some buildings, it might be, I have 3, and it's be respectful, be responsible, and be safe. And all of our building expectations, regardless of where we are in the building, are going to apply to that, right? So what does that look like at recess as opposed to in my classroom? It could be different adjectives or different components at different buildings that are more developmentally appropriate, say at the high school. It doesn't have to be the same common expectations across our entire district. We just need them to be explicitly teaching those 3 to 5 common expectations as a building system.
Then is it truly universal? Because are there going to be differences that if I go to Mulberry, that's different than if I go to Franklin, that's different than if I go to Jefferson, that's different than if I'm at Susan Clark? That's not truly a universal expectation then, is it?
Well, I think that that's something that we could discuss and consider as we're continuing to implement this. However, the evidence-based practice is simply the 3 to 5 common expectations that we're teaching. So I appreciate that, and that's definitely something for us to consider.
The other question I would have is how involved are the teachers in teaching those expectations?
They should be very involved with that.
The slide you showed, and I'm not trying to call you guys out, but the slide showed that it was like the expectation for teaching social skills was on the counselors. And where it really needs, I think where we really want it, where we really need it, is probably to have the universal expectations across the district from classroom to classroom, and the teachers to be so in tune with it that it's pretty consistent. Because when a kid goes from one classroom to another classroom, and they know that no matter who, especially as they get older and they have multiple teachers, then they're seeing, hey, the expectations of how I behave are pretty consistent from this door to this door to this door to this door. We also know that right now in our district that we pretty much have open enrollment. You don't like this building, you can say, I want to go to another building. So if my expectations at Grant were one thing, and then then I decided I moved, or my home district was really Franklin, I went back to Franklin, now I've got to relearn how to behave correctly, and we don't want it that part. I know that that's not what you're saying at all. We want the kids to behave the same no matter where they're at, So I think that we can help ourselves by setting up the format or the process. We can set things up so that no matter what building you're at, those expectations are the same. And I think that's what, I know that I'm on my last meeting, but I'm still a part of this community, and I'd still like to see that's where we go forward to.
Yeah, I think that's an important consideration.
I can echo it next month if you want.
Thanks.
Any other question for Becky and Paige? Okay, well, thank you for all the information you shared with us, and obviously,
We'll be
I'm
back.
sure the board looks forward for you to come back and present more. Thank you. Yeah, moving forward, we move into our superintendent update.
Yeah, so I just have a few things for you I want to share with you. One, obviously October 1st is when, we start looking at enrollment and start submitting and getting rid of errors in the system as we look at the number of students who have come in, who have left, and who are still here. So the deadline for that is for all of those errors to be resolved and uploaded into the state is October 15th. So we are moving forward with that and preparing for that. So I don't have numbers for you. We'll bring those back to you. What I can tell you is I would expect continued enrollment decline. As you look at our graduating class, last year was 350, 60 some. Our kindergarten class coming in is 300. So we know when we're exiting more than we're bringing in, at some point we're on the wrong side of that. We still have to finalize all the open enrollments in and out. What I can also tell you is now that open enrollment can occur really at any time, it's happening a lot more frequently, and not just here in Muscatine, across the state. So we'll bring that information back to you. But again, one of the things we saw in that enrollment study is, and right now we're seeing smaller elementary enrollments than we're seeing at the high school. As those bigger classes graduate, smaller classes moving through the system, we know that's going to impact the system, and that'll catch up to us eventually. So we're watching that very closely, but I'll bring that information back to you. Okay. We're coming up on, because we are in October, this is where we are now doing the yearly DDE, Desired Daily Experience survey. Obviously, with the legislative changes, we have to get explicit parent permission for students to take that. So we'll start getting that set up and sent out. Next week is conferences, so we know, the sooner we can get that out, we can come back as parents come in for conferences and different opportunities to try to get more of those. But we can expect that number to be significantly smaller that's taking the survey this year for students than it was last year. So anything we send out for specific permissions, we don't always get 100% response. And in this particular case, with those surveys, it's not they don't take it if the parent says no. They have to say yes in order for them to take it. So we know that'll be a little bit steeper hill for us to climb, but we'll continue to work on that. And then the last piece, just to kind of keep you in the loop on things, and we'll kind of show you some of this at our work session here later in October. So as we're finalizing the centralized kitchen, we have staff at the district office who will now be housed at that centralized kitchen. That's allowed us to free up some space, move some things around, and we will be identifying a space there that will be a dedicated board room that we'll set up where we can do our work sessions and we can do regular sessions there. And so I think from a facility standpoint, it's a better location for us. We'll be able to still do our live stream. We're working through that process. We want you to see that space. That probably won't occur until after the first of the year coming up. But you can take a look at that. When we don't have board meetings, it's another PD space that we can use. But it will be a great location, and it'll just bring all those things. And we can start talking about Do we change the time from 7 to 6:30, 6:15, whatever that might look like? I know that's been a conversation in the past, so just wanted you to know that's something that's in the works. And when you come to the work session in October, we'll give you a little tour of that area, and you can see what that's going to look like. Okay? Any questions for me?
How's the rest of the facilities upgrading?
They're coming along. We continue to have weekly meetings. I would say the kitchen is running slower than what we would like. And we're still running into a few issues there. Remember, that's not a project where Russell is the construction management firm on that. And I think we've made a little bit better progress on those other projects. Obviously, as we work through this fall, when rain happens, when the weather hits, that'll depend on some of this. But right now, we look to be on track for things.
Wrestling rooms looking to be finished before practice starts?
Yes.
Good.
Yep. Chris hasn't told me otherwise. Right now, the focus, though, is to get the existing room completed.
Mm-hmm.
There may be some things we have to finish in the expanded room, but getting that original room up and running is most important. We also know, just because of the backlog of things, the HVAC units will not be there until January, so we have to get temporary heating in there. Russell's aware of it. All the contractors are aware of that, so we'll have some temporary heating in there, and we know because it's a wrestling room, it needs to be nice and warm, good heating in there. So that'll get taken care of. But everything else seems to be moving along well.
Well, you talked about the DDE survey and the fact that we're expecting the student participation to be down. I know that as a board, one of the things that we talked about was the teacher participation. And I still think that there should be 100% participation. I think there's a way we could get 100% or 100% participation. And just throwing that back out there before we go, oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, and part of that is how are we creating opportunities for them to take it? Again, with students, we had set it up where we were having all of them take it. We will continue to encourage as many parents and staff to take it as possible, but also giving dedicated time for them to take it will increase that staff response.
Is the expectation that 100% take it?
We want everyone to take it.
That's different than wanting is different than expecting, right? I would like to see 100% be expected to take it. And if we provide them time, then they should.
Then it should
I
be
don't
done.
see any reason that they say, I can't or I won't. And if they say I won't, then I think that's a conversation with an administrator, with you, or whoever, why. Because then,
Okay.
I have like a three-part kind of, so it goes back to the acknowledgement of receiving the student handbook.
Yes.
So what was the percentage of that?
We were at 85%. And again, with that one, we could see, what was coming in. I'll have to follow up and see where we're currently sitting in the system. When we did registration, we had a 90% response rate. So
Perfect. That was one of my other questions.
not to interrupt, but the microphones aren't working. I didn't hear your question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the other legislative priorities, or we had to make sure that when people opened a student handbook, that they had received it, right? They've received
yeah,
it. So
yeah.
we have record of receipt, so that was at 85%, you said?
That we know have actually
They've
opened the
it.
link.
Oh, I think we're back.
Here now.
We're back.
We're back. Okay.
So,
The other part of the question that I didn't have to ask was that when it came to registration, we were at 90%. So people are using the electronic means. So is there a time frame that we have to be within before we can administer the surveys? Do you know exactly what I'm going to ask you?
Before we can administer the DDE survey?
Yeah, so when
Well, they would
can
have
we
to have
ask
it.
permission?
We'll start this week.
Okay.
And now next
So
year, we
next
can
year,
build all of
could
it
we
in.
tie all of it into
Correct.
registration, that
Yep.
we're going to administer the survey here, so then we're requiring one?
It won't be one checkoff, but so like with the registration process, we can have a screen that they have to respond to that they've acknowledged the handbook
Handbook,
before
yep.
they can move forward.
Okay.
And we can create a list of any common known surveys.
I mean,
Obviously,
just
we-
like field trips and publicity, right? We can put that on there for this survey that'll be administered at this time.
Correct.
Perfect, okay. Is that the plan?
That is the plan.
Okay.
Any other question for Clint? Okay, thank you, Clint. Moving forward, we move into our possible action item on our agenda. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. The items are minutes, bills and claims, employment recommendations, board policies, the third reading. What are the wishes of the board?
I'd like to be able to have the employment recommendations polled, please.
Okay, we have a request to pull the employment recommendations of the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have, again, a motion to pull the employment recommendations from the consent agenda, and we have second. Do we need to have discussion, or shall we proceed and vote on the other one and then come back to that? Okay, so that means we need to have now a motion to accept the possible action item with the exception of the employment recommendations. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda sans the employment recommendations.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on those items? Okay, those of you are in favor of accepting the consent agenda with the exception of item 3, employment recommendations, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Okay, motion carried. We go back to item 3 of our consent agenda, employment recommendations. And Karen, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, actually, it's just more of a clarification. And that is under new hires, it says classified professionals, and it says attendance and truancy liaison. I guess I need to have, not only for myself, but maybe for the public, to understand what is that position, what is the expectation for it.
Sure. I can start if anybody wants to follow up on it, but we've had a position over the last 2 years that has supported all the buildings in working on attendance, doing the follow-ups, checking in with each building as they have attendance meetings, who's in that process, where are they at, are letters being sent out. They work with the county attorney. It's a significant amount of work to just keep everybody moving forward. And it's been a good resource for the buildings to do that, and we've seen improvement. So we had somebody leave over the summer, and so we are rehiring that position.
Thank you.
Any other question about that? Okay, if there's no question
I have a
about...
question.
Oh, go ahead.
What's the pay scale for that job?
I'm going to kick that over to HR.
Sorry.
For these types of classified professionals, we start at $45,000. It's a salaried position, and it works 213 days out of the year. So a little bit before school starts, a little bit after, to make sure that we're always in connection with those families and providing that support.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, I suspect because we pulled this, we need to go back and approve that, so I need a motion also to approve item 3 of our consent agenda regarding the employment recommendations.
I make that recommendation that we approve the employment recommendations.
Second.
Okay, so we have, again, a motion and a second. Any more discussions? Okay, those of you are in favor of approving item 3 of our consent agenda, employment recommendations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. That takes us to the next page of our agenda, to approve board policies required by law 502.0, which is a new one, which is the discipline of students who make threats of violence or cause incidents of violence. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion to approve the policy 502.0.
Second.
Any discussion?
So I'll just put in here, usually with required policies, it's part of the consent agenda and it gets approved that way. I wanted to make sure we just pulled it out, as you might want to talk about it some. Obviously, this is something we've been waiting on. You are right, like, because it's required policy, we have to have it. IASB's recommendation is to use exactly the guidance that was given from the state. And then you'll see below, as we look at administrative regulations and the student handbook, we have to infuse those pieces into those documents as well. So that's where all those pieces kind of come into consideration. Again, we got this on the 19th, and but we have it before you today. So questions?
More of a comment. I think that, as we talked about at our community conversation, this policy, I think, is also going to be kind of a living document. We're going to see how things progress, how the state sees things progress, and I think that we can probably expect changes throughout the year. Would that be safe to say? Or maybe not the year, but throughout time?
Yeah, I think we will likely continue to get clarification as things happen across the state. As I mentioned previously, typically laws are passed to provide an additional level of consistency and clarity across all districts. And then we get guidance to further enhance that clarity and help us be more consistent. There's still pieces in here that aren't clear, and whenever that happens, it comes back to local control. So there's, we determine that. So as we look at level 1, level 2, level 3, is that incident 1, incident 2, incident 3? Is it the level of severity of that incident? So there's just little pieces like that I think will continue, I hope anyway, will continue to get clarified, and we'll make adjustments as those come up. And then all of our policies and procedures are kind of living documents, including the handbook, which we bring back to you each year.
Thank you.
Who is determining that clarification? Like, are you saying that it's from, or offering the guidance once it's clarified? Is that from the state?
What I would say right now, we would interpret that.
Okay.
However, at some point, I would imagine the state is going to provide additional clarification, or we'll hear, let's say there's an issue in another district, hopefully it's in another district, and then we'll get legal counsel that'll say, hey, based on this, we think you should do this, right? That's typically how those things kind of
And then that
transpire over
usually,
time.
if there's legal action, that usually goes out across the state of hey, this happened, you might want to consider this, so you're in front of it, so you're prepared if it happens in your district.
So the UEN, our Urban
ISAD.
Education Network, School Administrators of Iowa, they will continue to provide feedback as well based on what they're seeing and hearing to help provide that additional support.
So across the district, as soon as this is board approved, this is implemented.
Correct. And then
So
tomorrow.
how are they interpreting that?
So tomorrow, this will be approved, and we have an all administrator meeting, which we typically have after our board meetings. And this will be a focus of our work tomorrow. And it'll be ongoing work. So we continue to talk about it, clarify.
And then it gets back to building and classroom level when?
Well, that's part of the
But
process.
Lindsay, I think that part of what, at least maybe I'm wrong, and Becky and Paige can tell me, no, Mark, you're wrong. It won't be the first time. But I think that that's part of the work that they're doing too, is try to build that universal, so everybody, when they look at this, there's some commonality across the schools. So I think that that work, what I'm hearing tonight is that work is going to be meshed together, and they're going to grow together, and it should be a commonality across schools. Is that
But I'm just
fairly
asking,
accurate?
what is the timeline for implementation to be common across the schools? I mean, simple definitions could be an expectation we can meet tomorrow afternoon, right?
We're meeting tomorrow morning.
Oh, right. So, right.
It would be immediately.
So, but
Right.
like, is level 1 instance 1?
We haven't.
Or that's the
we haven't talked
conversation
about
you'll
that
have,
as
and
a-
then that will be.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
I have not sure if it's a question or statement or what here, but I found myself yellowing out every time it said it about placement in an alternative learning environment, including a therapeutic classroom when appropriate. Because I guess I come back to some questions that has to do about bullying, and from different ones that I've talked to, that they've indicated the bully is not the one that ends up in the end getting taken out of the classroom, or at least not for a long period of time. And that then, because of the escalating of the process of the bullying, that a lot of times the person that's being bullied actually then leaves school or is absent from school because of that bully being able to just get back into the classroom. So I guess what I'm asking perhaps on here is that, like, saying that it's a placement is a permanent placement, or is that just kind of like a temporary placement, like, okay, for a week you get something a little bit different, so you get your environment straightened out, and then you're right back into the classroom situation?
I think it depends.
That's a loaded question.
It depends. I mean, it could be everything from, obviously the goal is to have a safe and supportive learning environment, right? That's not continuing to occur. As things, I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily the first response is to move the student, right? Again, depending on what happened in this situation, because that's a wide open question that we're talking about here. It could mean changing schedules. It could mean changing classrooms. It could mean moving in the classroom so they're not near each other. Again, I think it would look different from an elementary situation to junior high to high school. There's just a lot of factors in that.
Thank you. That was a reasonable answer for a large questionable on there. Thank you.
On 502.9, physical restraint and seclusion of students, towards the end it mentions prior to using physical restraint or seclusion, employees must receive training in accordance with the law. Do we already do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's nothing new.
Most of that's special education based
For
the seclusion. And I could be wrong with that too. Not entirely, but when you're talking restraints most of the time. That's where that training comes in.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
I want to ask if it's possible, because of our viewers, so they need to hear the answer, if any of you would like to basically give an answer to Mike's question, please.
So yes and yes. So
Thank you.
we
and
do
thank you.
district-wide training 2 times a year. We have safety teams. Each school building identifies a safety team. That team goes through the CPI certification, de-escalation, and then part 2 of it is restraints and holds that have properly been okayed. Safety teams can be gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, security, paras. All administrators go through the CPI training as well. So buildings determine their team. We do that 2 times a year. When you're CPI certified, that certification is good for 2 years. So every semester we look at who's expiring, who's new, all that kind of stuff. So yes, we do that. Chapter 103 is actually not a special education law. It applies to gen ed. It applies to anyone that is in a situation that needs to intervene wherever. It's not just necessarily in a self-contained classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Any more questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, and we have plenty of discussion on this item. So at this point, I would say all those of you who are in favor of approving the board policies required by law 502.0, which is a new policy, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay. I see Tom is ready for us now. So moving forward is item G on our agenda to approve special education deficit. The district's administration is authorized to submit a request to the SBRC for a modified supplemental amount of $979,771 for negative special education costs for the 22-23 school years. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make the motion to approve authorization of the district administration to submit a request for the SBRC for modified supplemental amount of $979,771 for a negative special education cost of the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
So we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion and any questions for Tom? Or Tom, would you like to provide us with some
I'll
information?
just mention that this is an annual application. The next two items are two annual applications talking about spending authority. And I know you all know from your School Finance 101, 201, and 301 sessions that how important spending authority is to schools. And there are two areas that school districts are allowed to overspend their authority and then ask for that authority after the fact, kind of. And these are the two that were on the agenda tonight: special education and then allowable, LEP allowable costs. So I did provide you just a summary of the special education expenditures the last 3 years. I will point out that the numbers there are, I tried to give you the number of students that get tuitioned out. That's a special education expense. The number of students that we serve, I guess it's funded students versus served, because we take a special education count as well as a regular ed count. That count is usually at the end of October. And so we'll do a special ed count then for funding for 24-25. And so there you can see typically we do serve more than what we're funded, just because, you know, that's a count on one day. Well, students are staffed in, you know, all throughout the year. And then we also have students that are tuitioned in from other districts, and those are the number of students by level. There's level 1, 2, and 3 students. And then, you know, there are some additional resources for special education, one of them being online 14, which is Medicaid. We do provide services to our special ed students who are Medicaid eligible, and we haven't seen the level of revenue reimbursement for that since pre-COVID, so we are working to increase that as a way to help minimize our special education deficit, because that is one way that we can do that. And then, you know, a large expense in special education, besides salary and benefits, obviously, there are transportation expenses, and that did increase from last year. We do have one of the largest expenses there would have been for special education paras that we have on the buses that we have to, because of their IEP or whatever, we need to have special education aides on the buses. And we did have 4 additional last year compared to the prior year, and that did amount to around $40,000 or so. And then, you know, there's comparing our revenues and our expenses on line 17 and 18. So that's that's just kind of a summary of special education for our district. And then if, assuming you approve this application, then allow, as well as item H, you know, for last year, then we will have spent within 10% of our spending authority that we generated then for FY23, which I think is pretty, which is what we want to do every year, try to use that authority the years that we're funded for those students.
So Tom, just for the sake of our viewers, this is a regular or normal
Regular,
action that the
normal
board has to do once a year.
Correct.
In just these two areas.
Right.
So,
Correct.
okay, thank you. Any question for Tom? Okay, if there's no question, all those of you who are in favor of approving the special education deficit, which is the district administration is authorized to submit a request to the SBRC for a modified supplemental amount of $979,771 for negative special education course for the 22-23 school year. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you. Motion carried. So moving into item H is to approve the LEP allowable course. The district administration is authorized to submit a request to the SBRC for a modified supplemental amount of $414,000 and, I'm sorry, $414,923.86 due to excess cost of providing the LEP program in the year 22-23 school years. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve the LEP allowable cost as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion and second, and any more, I think you already explained that already, Tom, but any question regarding this item for Tom? Okay, all those of you who are in favor of approving the LEP allowable course item on our agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. The next item is to approve the purchase of playground equipment from Crouch Recreation, Inc. for Mulberry Elementary School in the amount of $290,822. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of playground equipment from Crouch Recreation for Mulberry Elementary School in the amount of $290,822.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second, and I see Chris is ready also to entertain any question, if any of you has any question for Chris regarding this item.
Is this the oldest playground equipment in the school over the elementary?
Yeah, that and Grant. So the plan is to get Mulberry up to date this fiscal year and then Grant after July. So the good thing about this company that we chose is the lead time is only 10 weeks on the equipment. Every other company is like 36 to 40 weeks. So we're hoping we can still get this installed either late this fall or early spring so the kids will have access to it this year.
Is that like a soft landing?
Yep. Yeah, that's a significant part of the cost, which we like to have obviously for the kids, and it's also accessible for our handicapped child. So.
Yeah.
Any other question for Chris?
Was PTO involved in all this, or who designed and picked all the playground equipment out?
Yep. So Stacy met with her PTO. They kind of came up with what they wanted. We went back and forth with Stacy and the company a few times, and she settled on this. She said this is exactly what they're looking for. So,
Deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so we have motion, second, and discussion. All those of you who are in favor of approving the purchase of playground equipment from Crouch Recreation, Inc. for Mulberry Elementary School in the amount of $290,822. please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. That will take us into our discussion and information section of our agenda. And the first item is the financial reports.
Okay.
Tom.
Yep. So tonight, presenting to you August and July bank reconciliations, and then also our treasurer's report for August 31st. And then I'm comparing that to last year just for your review. I also will have the annual transportation report summary. That was the third report that was due last September 15th. So we are in full throttle with our auditors this week. And they will be on site October 12th, which is Thursday. So, and then obviously there's the calendar for important events, November 7th, and then our meeting on the 20th. Well, we will have some more SBRC applications probably for enrollment purposes. So, I do have, July and August are pretty low-key months as far as our finances in schools, because a lot of our revenue doesn't happen until September and October with property taxes, and then our expenditures, we're still paying out last year's teachers' contracts in July and August. So you will see, and you should see, a large change in cash balance, and that's just because of that reason, is because of the revenue. And then on the treasurer's report too, if you look on the local property tax line, state and federal aid, obviously not a whole lot of activity. So the last document then I wanted to just review is the annual transportation report. There's no action that needs to be taken. It's just for informational purposes. The big thing that we look at, or that the state looks at then, is that average cost per pupil on line 28. And again, I've kind of summarized this, so you might want to know, Tom, your numbers are off because it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's because I hid some of the lines that really have either no numbers, or it's just a summary of our ATR here. So the last line there, 28, the average cost per pupil transported went from, it was $732.29 last year, and it down from $786. So a lot of things happen differently over the course of years. One thing I would point out is our miles on our special education buses and trips. The yellow bus miles and then the van miles increased at least 8,000, almost 9,000 miles. And then, some transportation expenses last year compared to the year before. I know we had at least 16 grand in cameras that we purchased for our buses, so that was an increase. And then I know we made some supply costs for parts and for tools for transportation. That also was an increase from the prior year. So I'm not, I don't have any other comments unless you have any questions, but I just needed to present just an overview of this, since this is one of the 3 reports that we do in finance. So, and hopefully Ryan's not here either to answer any questions. If you have specific drill down questions, I can certainly get those for you and let you know. So, thank you.
Any question for Tom? Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Okay, next item under discussion and information is item B, review administrative regulations. We have only one item there, 502.0R, which is a new item there. Discipline of students who make threats of violence or cause incidents of violence, which is administrative regulations. Anybody have any question for perhaps Clint and Daphne regarding that? Because you're going to see that again on the next item when we talk about the student handbook. So
Yeah, we kind of mentioned that when we went through the policy too, how all the pieces connect, and so this is just putting that all together.
Will we adopt this too so that some of these responses are consistent for discipline that is not violence related at all?
Yeah, so I think when you look at the consequences, they're very similar to what we already have in place, right? And whether, again, as we define level 1, 2, and 3, that certainly could apply to any of our behaviors.
And I think I saw a couple additions too that made it look like they were communicating with each other a little bit.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I know it doesn't call it out in any of the wording, at least that I haven't read, but I mean, a lot of this too falls under bullying, falls into this activity also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving forward, item C, review changes to student handbook. Under that, we have 3 items. One is a revision and 2 additions because of the change in the law. So item 1, revise MCSD behavior reporting, and you will find that revision on page 29. Item 2 is adding the policy 502.0. Which is the discipline of students who make threats of violence or cause incidents of violence on page 29. And item 3 is to add 502.0R, which is the discipline of students who make threats of violence or cause incidents of violence. It's administrative regulations, as we just mentioned before, on page 30. Any question on any of this?
Yes, I noticed toward the end of it, it has possible resolutions, and some things are yellowed and some things aren't on it. And then even as you go through some of the things like property damage, there's some that's yellow, and there's, you know, the purple and the, what is the intention of having the different colors?
This is the MCS behavior reporting that we already included in the handbook. And so everything you see in yellow is an addition, so that a lot of the things we already had in place. So we just had a few things we just added to be consistent and then to follow the new policies. So yellow means addition, strikeout means we're going to remove it. There are a couple things that just minor wording that we just removed so that it would be consistent with that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other question? Okay, thank you. So moving forward to the next item, announcements, meetings, and events. October 16 to 19, School Conference Week. October 19, 2-hour early dismissal. October 20th, Conference Comp Day, no school. October 23rd, which is the work session and closed session at the MCSD Administration Center at 6 p.m. Basically, we start with the work session and we move into a closed session as a board. Then October 24, the SIAC meeting, MCSD Administration Center at 4:30 p.m. November 7th, City School Election Day, polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. that day. November 20th, a school board community conversation at 6 p.m., lower level City Hall. And November 20th, annual/organizational meeting of the Board of Directors, 7 p.m. at City Hall. I just want to remind everybody that the meeting in November is not the second Monday due to the election, so it will be on November 20th. The meeting, first, we as a board finalize our work for the year. It will be a quick meeting, and then the new board will take it from there and start their organizational meeting. Any other announcement?
Yeah, John, I just want to remind too, because of the election, we're moving the food pantry to November 14th. So normally it would have been on the 7th, but it will be hard to do elections at the district office and also a food pantry at the same time. So for that month, it is on the 14th.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay. Good night, everybody.